I'm ready to explode, says Ange Postecoglou as he welcomes his Tottenham players back from international duty to take on West Ham tomorrow. We've had 2 weeks to sit and dwell on that Brighton result a couple of weeks ago. The worst defeat of Ange Postecoglou's tenure so far at Spurs, and we need to see a response tomorrow. But how do we go about getting that and getting that momentum back that we saw prior to that Brighton game? Welcome back to the Ben Bowman YouTube channel. I hope you guys are doing well. As always, we're going to be previewing the West Ham game tomorrow, and as always, there will be a breakdown on the channel on Sunday after the game, hopefully talking about a Spurs victory. So make sure to subscribe for that. And how do Spurs go about getting that? Let's go straight into it. Do there need to be changes made to that back line? Does Radu Dragusin need to come in for Christian Romero? Does Djed Spence need to come in for Destiny Udogie at left back? Both of those two players have been underwhelming in recent weeks. Christian Romero so poor against Brighton, not taking enough responsibility at the back, certainly for that third goal in my opinion. And Destiny Udogie had one of the poorest games that he's had for Spurs. But do changes need to be made? In my opinion, no. I don't think that is the right game to do this. Christian Romero gives us so much in possession. And if you look back at Destiny Udogie, I think he'd actually been building up back to that level that we saw last season. And then Brighton, it all fell apart. But that doesn't mean that he needs to be taken out the side, in my opinion. I think those fullbacks have been developing in a new role so far this season, with Porro and Udogie staying higher and wider, not as involved in build-up in central areas, what we've seen. And I think that's benefited the system. So I don't think bringing in Djed Spence or Radu Dragusin into this game is the right answer for me. I think we stick with that back four. The only questions for me, I think Son Heung-Min comes straight back in for Timo Werner. The other question is in midfield. Do you bring Yves Bissouma back in for Rodrigo Bentancur, who also had a poor second half at Brighton and was one of the reasons, in my opinion, that we capitulated, weren't able to have as much control in midfield as we were in the first half. A lot of what we did in that second half was poor at Brighton. We were so passive in terms of our press, passive in terms of our defending. Is this one you bring Yves Bissouma back in for? I would probably stick with Rodrigo Bentancur. I think those performances against Brentford and Manchester United were so good, at such a high level, that I think in this game, especially where West Ham are going to try and hit us on the counter-attack, against Brentford at home especially, he was so good at putting out those fires in transition and breaking up play and putting us back on the front foot. However, we are going to lose Rodrigo Bentancur for a period of time at some point. So is this a game after the international break that you bring Yves Bissouma back in and start to build back up his load in games to get him back to a place where he's going to be having to fill in for Rodrigo Bentancur every week once that ban actually comes in? We don't know when that's going to come in. We don't know how long the ban's going to be. And look, Yves Bissouma, when he has played in these games so far this season, has looked good. He was excellent against Everton. I think his passing range has improved massively this season. And again, out of possession as well. He gives you so much in this team. Both of them, when they're at their best, are top quality options. And to me, it's a bit of a toss of the coin tomorrow to who plays in there. I would probably still go with Bentancur because he's been playing in recent weeks, but I do think we have to have a conversation at some point about when we integrate Yves Bissouma back into that side. Son on the left-hand side, though, comes in for me for Timo Werner. Obviously, Son Heung-Min, it's got to be the first time in a long time that he's not gone away on international duty with Korea because of the injury that he picked up before the international break. So hopefully he's sharp, fresh and ready to go. Because I do think Son Heung-Min is going to be vital in this game. Obviously, one-on-one defending is a massive strength for Aaron Wan-Bissaka. I think we've seen that Son Heung-Min, at the age that he is at now, has limitations as that touchline winger. And I do think that the way that Spurs are playing now, with those fullbacks staying higher and wider and not as involved, cramping the central areas, that will give Son Heung-Min more freedom to move inside away from Wan-Bissaka, where he's not having to stand him up and take him on every time, because we know that defending one-on-one is such a strength of Aaron Wan-Bissaka. So for me, that's how it looks for Spurs tomorrow. Basically the same as what we have been doing, but Son Heung-Min coming back in for Timo Werner. Like I said, I don't think it's the game to make those changes in defence. Christian Romero has got to know that there is someone ready to come in to replace him if he continues to perform in this manner and not show enough responsibility at the back as that leader. Look, we saw at Brighton, we have seen in several other games this season. Leicester away was another one. But for me, this is how you go. So how are West Ham going to hurt us? How different are they to what we saw last season and what we have seen in previous years under David Moyes? Here I've kind of got an example of what they've sort of been looking like a little bit in build-up. They certainly are more adventurous under Julian Lopetgui in that 4-3-3 system. They do want to have more of the ball. They are actually unbeaten away from home. Obviously, their home form hasn't been great, but you have to take into account the opposition that they have played. Manchester City, Chelsea, heavy defeats at home to both of those. A heavy defeat away to Liverpool in the Carabao Cup. But away from home, they've obviously got points against Fulham, Brentford, and beat Crystal Palace as well. And this changing system is, it's different to what we've seen before under David Moyes, where they would kind of sit in, try and catch teams cold on the break. And West Ham have averaged less possession away from home than they have at home. They've been dominating the ball at home, but it's not been quite clicking. They are coming into this one on the back of a win against Ipswich, however. But away from home, they have been having less of the ball. So there will be an element of West Ham almost reverting to type a little bit in terms of what we expect about them sitting in and trying to hit us on the break. And they have got big threats in that area in terms of players like Djed Bowen and Mohamed Kudus. Emerson and Wan-Bissaka obviously playing a part in that as well, kind of staying wider, making those more vertical runs, where Bowen and Kudus will look to come inside. Djed Bowen is a player that I love so much, who I think can really hurt Tottenham tomorrow. Obviously, Mikel Antonio will play. He'll cause the centre-backs a handful. And I do think, although the fact that West Ham aren't exactly the most intense pressing side, which I can show you now, they will kind of pick their moments and have picked their moments in certain games. I was looking back at some of the footage from the Brentford game they played away a couple of weeks ago, where they did hurt Brentford in the press at times, being quite aggressive, getting the likes of Souček and Bowen high up to win the ball back and create chances that way. But as you can see, they kind of sit... they certainly sit in a mid-block, but also they kind of are on the lower end of that kind of pressing intensity scale in terms of what they do and how they press. Whereas you look at Tottenham, in terms of our pressing intensity, we are up there right at the top. Obviously, high PPDA, high turnovers, high pressing intensity. So we might see a slightly different West Ham to what we have seen in recent years. And obviously they've got a good record here, which makes me nervous for this game. And I do think Bowen and Kudus are going to be the main threats because, like I said, they will try and soak up pressure and hit us on the break. They tend to sit in more of a mid-block under Julian Lopetgui rather than a low block under David Moyes. So they will try and get on the ball. And if you look at Todibo and Kilman as that centre-back pairing, their role in possession is a lot more advanced than the centre-backs previously under David Moyes. They will be involved in build-up. They're good at breaking the lines with their passing. And I think I have noticed a noticeable improvement in West Ham since Jean-Claire Todibo has had a more consistent run in the side. However, in terms of Spurs out of possession, in terms of us being able to press West Ham, we know we've created a lot of chances from winning the ball back high up the pitch. Haven't been able to convert a hell of a lot of those, but we know we carry that threat. We saw that against Manchester United, and we saw that against Brentford as well. If teams are just off it with their ability to play out from the back, Spurs will capitalise with Dejan Kulusevski, with Dominic Solanke, arguably the best pressing centre forward in the Premier League. James Maddison, who I think's work out of possession has improved so much this season. They will be on those centre-backs. Obviously, look, Kilman and Todibo are much more equipped at kind of breaking those lines and playing out from the back than the centre-backs that they've lined up previously. Again, Ogbonna, for example, they are much more comfortable on the ball. And if they are able to kind of break these lines playing out from the back and break that Spurs press, then of course there will be opportunities for the likes of Lucas Paquetá or Souček to kind of drive up the field with it and then get the ball into the more dangerous players like Djed Bowen. Obviously, I think Rodriguez will kind of drop more into back three when they're kind of building up. But Todibo and Kilman are good on the ball. However, Spurs have shown that even against some of the best sides that will try to build up from the back, that they can hurt teams in the turnover. Like I said, Solanke and Kulusevski's roles especially are going to be a massive, massive part of that. But if West Ham are able to break through, of course, they have got the threat on the break, like I illustrated before, with Kudus and Djed Bowen kind of making these runs into the channels, carrying the ball for long distances. And obviously, they have got a lot of creativity and quality in that side. And Thomas Souček, I think, as well, someone late runs into the box, getting forward, is someone that can hurt us. I think we saw that especially in the game away at Crystal Palace that West Ham won. His ability to get really involved, almost beyond Antonio at times, I think, is a way that they could definitely hurt us. They are more patient. They are more slow in build-up with a focus on playing through the lines, like I said. And there is an argument to suggest that maybe this doesn't suit their quick wingers as much, but I think this is where the fullbacks come into it with Emerson and Wan-Bissaka. Emerson is someone that I'm actually consistently quite impressed with at West Ham, his ability to kind of get up and down. But again, that slightly more adventurous approach, like I said, might suit Tottenham and kind of play into their hands, because West Ham have left gaps this season. When you look at the game that they played against Chelsea, again, this was at home where they are going to be naturally a little bit more on the front foot. Like I said, they do average more possession and have averaged more possession than all of their opponents bar Manchester City, I think, at home in every game so far they've played this season, against Chelsea and against Ipswich, of course. But they have left gaps. However, since this game, I think, against Chelsea, things have started to click a little bit more for them. But this was a game where they really showed their vulnerable side and ability to get... Chelsea showed their ability to really break through them with ease. All three goals kind of coming from those direct balls played between the centre-backs or direct counter-attacks where they were kind of creating these 3v2 situations. And Spurs can obviously do that tomorrow. But I do think, again, Spurs' threat is going to come from their pressing. And I think that kind of goes hand in hand with the fact that we just need to see that response from Spurs tomorrow. Like I said, Ange Postecoglou said that he's ready to explode at these players when they come back from international duty. And I don't know about you, but I would not want to be on the end of a hairdryer treatment or the hairdryer treatment from Ange. One thing that massively dropped off in that second half against Brighton was our play out possession. I think when you look back at that first goal, and obviously you had to give credit to Brighton for how they tactically changed the game, bringing Estepinian on to give them more of an outlet down that left-hand side. But if you look back at that first goal, Solanke is the only one that goes and presses the goalkeeper. Nobody follows him up, and we become so easy to play through. So that press has got to be right back on it tomorrow. And again, we're coming back from 2 weeks off. We're coming back from players playing on international duty. But Solanke only played... he didn't even play in the second game for England, and they played on Sunday, so he's been back. Maddison didn't go away. Obviously, Sonny didn't go away. Kulusevski was on fire for Sweden, so hopefully he can continue that. And Kulusevski, look, is a player that I'm not worried about in terms of downing tools or dropping responsibility from what Ange Postecoglou wants them to do. Obviously, Brennan Johnson is coming back into this fresh after being suspended for the second game for Wales. Obviously, scored in the first one as well. So they've been able to carry over, for large parts, the form that we have seen so far this season into their international breaks, for the most part, with these players. But we just need to see a response, because that second half against Brighton was unacceptable. When Spurs press like they do, we can hurt any team in the league, hurt any team in Europe. We are arguably the best at it in the league in terms of being able to create chances as well. And that is something that has got to be really back at that super, super aggressive, effective level tomorrow. Because West Ham, like I said, although I do think they'll sit back and be a bit more reserved than they have in some of the games, their defensive shape is starting to come together. Those players are starting to gel in that system a little bit more. You're starting to see more from the likes of Paquetá. And I think one of the big things for West Ham was that in that game against Ipswich, some of the players who haven't really showed up for them so far this season, in Paquetá, in Mohamed Kudus, started to fire. Obviously, both getting goals. Jarrod Bowen is a player that any team will be consistently worried about. And Mikel Antonio, West Ham seem to buy a striker every summer, but he still ends up being the number 9, and is one that can cause us problems, as he has done in the past. But these players are starting to come together. It's starting to gel. Like I said, dominated the ball, 53% possession. They had more of it than Ipswich, as you'd expect against Ipswich. No disrespect to them, but they were able to create 23 shots. Their box efficiency, West Ham, is quite good. Up there with some of the best in the league when they do get into the box and are able to get shots off. And I do think things are starting to slowly sort of come together. Starting to slowly come together for them. And if you go back to that game that they played against Brentford a couple of weeks ago, their last away game, you can see Bowen kind of operating a bit narrow in those kind of more central channels in between the centre-back and the full-back, whereas Kudus will drift that little bit more wider. So Bowen will kind of act as that second striker with Antonio, which again will help them in their press. More of a compact midfield with Souček and Guido Rodriguez as well, who's playing at the moment. Obviously, Wan-Bissaka's average position here is a little bit skewed, for sure. He wasn't really operating in that central area, but again, showing he can get up and down both flanks for sure, and that the centre-backs will kind of play a little bit higher and will have a lot of touches and have a lot of involvement in the build-up. So that is something that Spurs need to capitalise on tomorrow, because like I said, although they are starting to feel a little bit more settled on the ball, with how good we are at turning the ball over, that is how we will create chances tomorrow. And again, they're not quite as solid as they have been. So Spurs, out of possession and in possession, will have to be absolutely on it tomorrow. And like I said, we just need to see a response. That second half against Brighton was absolutely unacceptable. Absolutely unacceptable. And I think the players, I think they know that. I think they know that. The manager knows that. And like I said, he will get them fired up. And I think it's one of those games for Spurs tomorrow where I would not be surprised if in the first 15, 20 minutes, we go 2-0 up and try and take the game away from West Ham, because of the rocket that's kind of gone up their backside over the international break or since they've come back, as Ange kind of alluded to. I would not be surprised if we do see that immediate response, but again, we cannot afford to take our foot off the gas. I want to see what we saw against Brentford. I want to see a team that was being doubted after the North London derby loss. I want to see a team that was being doubted after the Coventry game really come back with a response. We went 1-0 down early in that game to an Mbuemo goal, but the way that we responded in that one is what I want to see from Spurs tomorrow. And look, you can't just... The second half against Brighton doesn't undo all of the good work that we put in the previous 5 games where we won and we were scoring goals. Brennan Johnson was on fire. He continued that, obviously, into the Brighton game. But that second half against Brighton was so unacceptable that we really need... It feels like we really need to almost start again. And we can't just brush it under the carpet. But a win tomorrow, and a convincing win tomorrow against West Ham, does do a lot to kind of just put that game in the past and say, look, we draw a line under it. That doesn't happen again. And we move on from there. And I think that's down to the players to show Ange Postecoglou that they are able to do that. And like I said, I want to see more aggressiveness again with our out-possession work. I think we can hurt them balls into the box as well. I think we can hurt them with that combination play with Son and Udogie and Porro and Kulusevski and Johnson down either side as well. I'm not too worried about that. I'm more worried about defensively and our defenders taking responsibility and defending with as much assertiveness and aggressiveness in comparison to how we attack. I want to see us defend with the same aggressiveness and assertiveness in the way that we approach our attacking game, because what we saw against Brighton was unacceptable, as I've mentioned. But yeah, big game big game tomorrow. Big London derby, big game for certain players to really prove that that game was just a bit of a blip and a one-off, and we won't do that again. I'm looking at Romero, I'm looking at Destiny Doggy, because there are players there that can push them for that first team spot, and they aren't undroppable. But the attack I'm not too worried about, because I know we'll create chances. Spurs have got the most amount of XG. I think we're creating, on average, over 2.5 XG per game in the Premier League this season. So you're kind of going into it knowing that we will get chances. It's just about putting them away. But again, with the way that the attack is firing at the moment, I want to see a response, and I want to see them go out and put that game to bed early and have a comfortable afternoon against an improving West Ham team. Which is important to say. Like I said, guys, there will be a breakdown video on my channel on Sunday after the game, in which we'll talk about it in more detail, talk about, hopefully, a Spurs victory. Make sure to get your score predictions in the comments below. I'm going for a 3-1 Spurs victory. I think we do get the job done. Like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if we go 2-0 up in the first half. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if West Ham score, because we can't keep a clean sheet at the moment, despite the fact that we obviously did it against Manchester United. But at home, obviously, that has been a problem in the last few games. But yeah, I'm confident that we'll get a victory and we will see a response. And let me know if you disagree on anything in terms of the lineup as well. Good to be back doing this. Good to be back talking about Spurs after an international break. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure to like it for me and subscribe to the channel, and up the Spurs. Nice one.